My name is Claude, and I just turned 32 last month. Growing up, my little sister Amanda and I were inseparable despite our 4-year age gap. That bond made me drive 9 hours through a raging snowstorm to surprise her at her engagement party with her favorite childhood cake. Our family relationships had gotten complicated after our parents split, but I was determined to be there for her special day. When I finally arrived at the venue, exhausted but excited, I paused outside the door when I heard her voice say clearly, "I honestly hoped he would crash on the way here." While I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe to join others who have found strength in painful family moments. Amanda and I grew up in Minneapolis, in a modest 2-story house with a big backyard where we built snowmen in winter and chased fireflies in summer. Being 4 years older, I naturally fell into the protective big brother role. I taught her how to ride a bike, running alongside her until she found her balance. I helped her with homework, especially math, which she struggled with but eventually mastered thanks to our weekend study sessions at the kitchen table. We had our arguments like all siblings do, but they never lasted long. By nightfall, we would be huddled together watching movies or playing board games as if nothing had happened. Our parents, Mark and Sarah, seemed happy enough on the surface, though in retrospect, there were signs of trouble I was too young to recognize. Dad worked long hours at his accounting firm, while Mom managed a local boutique. They were providers more than nurturers, leaving Amanda and me to rely heavily on each other for emotional support. Perhaps that was why we became so close. Everything changed when I was 16, and Amanda was 12. I still remember the night Dad sat us down in the living room, his voice unnaturally steady as he explained that he and Mom were getting divorced. Mom stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes red from crying. It turned out Dad had been having an affair with a colleague for nearly 2 years. The betrayal crushed Mom, and the subsequent divorce proceedings turned ugly fast. Almost overnight, I went from carefree teenager to emotional anchor for my sister. Amanda took it especially hard, her grades dropping as she withdrew into herself. I would find her crying in her room at night, and I would sit with her, sometimes in silence, sometimes telling her silly stories to make her smile again. When Mom started working longer hours to make ends meet, I stepped up even more, making sure Amanda ate properly, got to school on time, and had someone to talk to about her day. The custody arrangement had us spending weekdays with Mom and weekends with Dad, who had moved to an apartment across town. Dad tried to make those weekends fun with trips to the mall or movies, but there was an undercurrent of tension that never really dissipated. Amanda eventually refused to go, leaving me caught in the middle. I continued the visits out of a sense of obligation, though they became increasingly awkward as Dad tried to explain his actions in ways that never quite made sense to a teenager. Despite these challenges, I managed to maintain good grades and got accepted to the University of Washington in Seattle. Leaving Amanda behind was the hardest decision I ever made, but Mom assured me that Amanda would be fine and that I deserved to pursue my dreams. I promised to call every day and visit during breaks. For the first year, I kept that promise religiously. After graduating with a degree in software engineering, I landed my dream job at a tech startup in Seattle. The work was demanding, requiring long hours and total commitment. Gradually, those daily calls to Amanda became weekly, then monthly. She was in high school by then, busy with her own life, but in hindsight, I realized that was when our relationship began to fray. Amanda stayed in Minneapolis after high school, attending the University of Minnesota. I sent money when I could to help with her expenses, though I rarely mentioned this to her, not wanting to embarrass her or make her feel like a charity case. Our conversations became increasingly strained as the years passed. She would make comments about me abandoning the family, about how she had needed me during her teenage years when I was building my career across the country. I tried to explain the pressure I was under, how I was trying to establish myself so I could better help her and Mom, but my explanations always sounded hollow, even to my own ears. 10 years passed this way, with our relationship deteriorating slowly but surely. Then Amanda met James at her workplace, an advertising agency where she had become a rising star in account management. Their romance was whirlwind fast, engaged within 6 months of dating. I learned about the engagement through a brief phone call that lasted less than 5 minutes. Despite the distance between us, I was genuinely happy for her. James seemed, from what little I knew, like a stable, caring partner, something Amanda deserved after our tumultuous childhood. When I asked about wedding plans, she was vague, saying they were still figuring things out. I offered to help financially, but she declined, her voice taking on that tight quality it always did when she felt I was trying to buy my way back into her life. It was through Facebook that I learned about the engagement party, not through a direct invitation. Mom had commented on a post about preparations for the event, scheduled for the following weekend. When I called Amanda to ask about it, she seemed flustered, claiming the invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. She gave me the details reluctantly, her tone suggesting she was merely being polite. That was when I decided to make a grand gesture. Instead of simply attending as expected, I would surprise her, showing up unannounced with a special cake from Sweetheart's Bakery, the place that had made all our childhood birthday cakes. It would be my way of saying I was still the brother who remembered the little things that mattered to her, that despite the physical distance, she remained important to me. I thought it would be the perfect way to begin repairing our fractured relationship. Little did I know how dramatically this well-intentioned plan would backfire, revealing truths I was not prepared to face. The weather forecast had warned about the approaching winter storm system for days, but I dismissed the concerns. Growing up in Minneapolis had given me plenty of experience with snow, and my determination to reach Amanda overrode any cautionary instinct. I requested time off work, explaining to my boss that this was a family emergency of sorts. She was understanding, giving me Thursday and Friday plus the weekend, though she jokingly warned me not to get stranded. My first stop was Sweetheart's Bakery in Seattle, where I had specially ordered a replica of the chocolate raspberry cake that Amanda had loved as a child. The elderly baker, Mrs. Wilson, had been skeptical about creating such an elaborate cake for a road trip, especially with a storm approaching, but I convinced her I would keep it refrigerated and drive carefully. She packed it in a special container with ice packs, shaking her head at what she clearly considered a foolish endeavor. "Young man, no cake is worth risking your life over," she said as she handed me the box. "It is when it might help fix a broken relationship," I replied with more confidence than I felt. I left Seattle early Wednesday morning, hoping to reach Minneapolis by Thursday evening, giving myself plenty of time before the Saturday party. The first few hours were uneventful, the roads clear and my spirits high. I listened to podcasts and old playlists that Amanda and I had created together in high school. The nostalgia fueled my conviction that this surprise would bridge the gap between us. By the time I reached Montana, the weather had begun to deteriorate. Light snow turned into driving sleet that pounded my windshield. The highway patrol had reduced speed limits, and traffic crawled along the interstate. I stopped for lunch at a diner where the television was broadcasting weather warnings for the entire region. Fellow travelers discussed road closures and accidents, some deciding to wait out the storm. "You heading east?" asked a trucker as we both waited for our food. When I nodded, he grimaced. "Might want to consider holing up somewhere for the night. It is getting nasty out there." I thanked him for his concern, but explained I had a family event I could not miss. The urgency in my voice must have convinced him not to push further. Back on the road, conditions worsened by the hour. Visibility dropped to mere feet in front of my car, the windshield wipers struggling against the accumulating snow. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, every muscle tense as I navigated the increasingly treacherous conditions. Twice I nearly slid off the road, the car fishtailing before I regained control. By evening, exhaustion had set in, and I began looking for a motel. The first 3 I tried were completely booked with other stranded travelers. At the fourth, a rundown place with a flickering neon sign, the clerk took pity on me. "Got 1 room left, but the heating is iffy," he warned. "Take it or leave it." I took it gratefully, collapsing onto the lumpy mattress for a few hours of restless sleep, setting an alarm for 3 a.m. to get back on the road early. The pre-dawn darkness, combined with the snowstorm, created near impossible driving conditions. Several times I considered turning back or at least waiting for daylight, but the thought of disappointing Amanda again spurred me forward. I had promised myself this would be a new beginning for us, and I was determined to make it happen. Midway through North Dakota, disaster struck. My car began making an ominous knocking sound, followed by a plume of steam from under the hood. I managed to pull over just as the engine died completely. Stranded on a desolate stretch of highway with the temperature well below freezing, I called for roadside assistance. "Given the weather, it will be at least 3 hours before anyone can reach you," the dispatcher informed me. I had no choice but to wait, periodically starting the car to run the heater for a few minutes, then shutting it off to conserve gas. I called my roommate Tyler back in Seattle, who thought I had lost my mind. "Dude, turn around," he urged. "No family party is worth freezing to death in North Dakota." "You do not understand," I insisted. "This might be my only chance to fix things with Amanda. She thinks I abandoned her. Because you drove across the country in a blizzard once. That does not erase 10 years. His words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. Was I doing this more for myself than for Amanda? Was this grand gesture just a way to assuage my own guilt? The mechanic finally arrived, a gruff man in his 60s who diagnosed the problem as a burst radiator hose. He performed a temporary repair, enough to get me to the nearest town where I could find a proper garage. The detour cost me 4 precious hours and nearly $800 in emergency repair fees. Back on the road, I encountered my worst moment yet. Crossing a bridge over the Missouri River, my car hit a patch of black ice. The world spun in slow motion as I lost all control, the car rotating a full 180 degrees before slamming into the guardrail. Airbags deployed, filling the car with acrid smoke and dust. Miraculously, I was unhurt aside from a bloody nose, and what would later become an impressive bruise across my chest from the seatbelt. A highway patrol officer who witnessed the accident pulled over to help. After determining I was not seriously injured, he warned me that the road ahead was even worse. "I strongly advise you to find accommodation in the next town and wait this out," he said firmly. Shaken by the near miss, I agreed, following him to a small town where he directed me to a motel. I spent the night there, watching the weather reports and contemplating the wisdom of continuing. By morning, the storm had lessened slightly, and road crews had been working through the night. The motel owner, hearing about my journey, offered me a thermos of coffee and sandwiches for the road. "Family is worth it," she said kindly. "Just get there in one piece." Her encouragement renewed my determination. I set out again, driving more cautiously now, the previous day's accident a sobering reminder of the stakes. The remainder of the journey through North Dakota and into Minnesota was grueling but uneventful. As I approached the Minneapolis outskirts, a profound sense of relief washed over me. I had made it against considerable odds. The familiar skyline of my hometown emerged through the falling snow, bringing with it a flood of memories. I navigated the city streets with the ease of someone returning to a place once known intimately. Despite my exhaustion, a bubble of excitement formed in my chest. In just a few hours, I would see the look of surprise on Amanda's face when I walked in with her favorite cake. All the hardship of the journey would be worth it for that moment of reconnection. Or so I thought. The engagement party was being held at the lakeside, an upscale event venue overlooking one of Minneapolis' many lakes. In summer, its glass walls offered stunning views of the water. Now, in the depths of winter, those same windows revealed only swirling snow against an inky black backdrop. The building glowed with warm light, cars lining the circular drive despite the weather. Clearly, the storm had not deterred the local guests. I parked some distance away, not wanting my arrival to be noticed prematurely. After retrieving the cake from its special cooler in the trunk, I took a moment to assess my appearance in the rearview mirror. 3 days of travel had left me looking considerably worse for wear. My normally neat hair was disheveled, dark circles underlined my bloodshot eyes, and stubble shadowed my jaw. My clothes, while clean thanks to a quick change at the last rest stop, were rumpled from the long drive. Still, none of that mattered. This was about Amanda, not me. I carefully carried the cake box through the snow, taking cautious steps on the slippery pavement. As I approached the venue's entrance, I noticed the elegant decorations visible through the glass door's gold and white balloons, tasteful floral arrangements, a professionally lettered banner congratulating the happy couple. The sight made me smile. Amanda had always had impeccable taste. Just as I reached for the door handle, I heard familiar laughter from an open window just to my right. Amanda's laugh, unmistakable even after all these years. Without thinking, I moved closer to the window, curious to catch a glimpse of my sister before making my entrance. "I cannot believe Claude might actually show up tomorrow," I heard Amanda say, her voice carrying clearly through the slightly ajar window. The sound of my name stopped me in my tracks. "I thought you did not invite him," a male voice responded. James, I presumed, though I had never met him. "Mom made me send that Facebook invitation," Amanda replied with a sigh. "She still has this fantasy that we are one big happy family." "So is he coming or not?" another female voice asked. There was a pause before Amanda spoke again, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Last I heard, he was driving all the way from Seattle." In this weather, she laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "I honestly hoped he would crash on those icy roads before getting here." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. I nearly dropped the cake box, my fingers suddenly numb. "Amanda," someone exclaimed, though her tone suggested amusement rather than genuine shock. "What? It is not like he would be a great loss. He abandoned us years ago, only calls when he feels guilty, and then acts like sending money makes up for everything." There was a bitterness in her voice I had never heard before or perhaps had never allowed myself to hear. "Tell them about that time in high school," another voice urged. Amanda launched into a story about how I had forgotten to pick her up from a dance, leaving her stranded at school until nearly midnight. The truth was that my car had broken down, and I had called multiple times to explain, eventually convincing a friend's parent to pick her up. But in Amanda's retelling, I had simply forgotten her, too busy with my own social life to care about my little sister's needs. As she continued with more stories, each one a distorted version of events that painted me as selfish and uncaring, I stood frozen outside the window, the cake growing heavy in my arms. The worst part was hearing James join in, making jokes about someone he had never met based solely on Amanda's warped narratives. "He sounds like a real piece of work," James said. "Showing up now after all these years, probably just to show off how successful he is and make everyone else feel small." "That is exactly who he is," Amanda agreed. "Everything has always been about Claude. Even my engagement has somehow become about him, and whether he will grace us with his presence." Her friends laughed, raising their glasses in a mock toast. "To Claude, may his GPS fail him before he ruins yet another family occasion." Their laughter cut through me, each chuckle like a knife slicing away the illusions I had built around our relationship. All those times I had told myself that Amanda understood why I had left, that she knew I cared despite the distance I had allowed to grow between us, all of it crumbled under the weight of her evident disdain. The most painful revelation was not that Amanda was angry with me. I had known that for years, but that her anger had calcified into something colder and harder. She did not just resent me. She actively wished me harm. The sister I had driven through a blizzard to surprise, the sister for whom I had risked my life multiple times over the past 72 hours, would have preferred news of my accident to my actual presence at her celebration. As I stood there, feeling the cold seep through my clothes and into my bones, I confronted the harsh truth. The relationship I had come to repair might be beyond salvation. Perhaps it had been for years, and I had been too stubborn or too blind to see it. In that moment, I had a choice. I could walk away, get back in my car, and begin the long journey home with no one the wiser. I could protect myself from further hurt by retreating before Amanda even knew I was there. It would be the easiest option, certainly the least painful in the immediate term. but something in me rebelled against that course of action. I had not driven 9 hours through a snowstorm, survived a car accident, and spent nearly $1,000 on emergency repairs just to slink away without being seen. More importantly, I was tired of the lies and half-truths that had characterized our relationship for the past decade. If nothing else, Amanda and I deserved honesty between us, even if that honesty brought pain. With that resolution firming my spine, I adjusted my grip on the cake box and moved toward the main entrance. Whatever happened next, at least there would be no more illusions. I entered the lakeside with a strange calm, the kind that descends when you have nothing left to lose. The reception area opened into a larger event space where about 50 people stood in small groups, champagne flutes in hand, engaged in animated conversation. A string quartet played softly in the corner, nearly drowned out by the buzz of voices and occasional laughter. It took only moments for the first person to notice me, a woman whose eyes widened at my disheveled appearance. Then another turned, and another, until a wave of silence spread through the room like ripples on a pond. Conversations halted mid-sentence as heads turned toward me, the stranger with the large cake box standing in the doorway. And then I saw her. Amanda stood near a decorative fireplace, resplendent in a silvery cocktail dress, her hair styled in an elegant updo so different from the ponytail she had worn throughout our childhood. Beside her was a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, whom I presumed to be James. As the silence alerted them to my presence, Amanda's face underwent a remarkable transformation: horror, recognition, shock, and finally, a mask of artificial welcome that did nothing to disguise the panic in her eyes. I walked slowly toward her, careful not to slip on the polished floor with my snow-dampened shoes. The crowd parted before me, murmurs beginning to rise like the first stirrings of wind before a storm. I was acutely aware of how out of place I looked among these well-dressed, coiffed individuals, but I kept my head high. When I reached Amanda, I carefully set the cake box down on a nearby table. I opened it to reveal the chocolate raspberry creation, perfect despite the journey, with "Congratulations, Amanda and James," written in elegant script across its surface. "Surprise," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the hushed room. "Your favorite. From Sweetheart's Bakery." Amanda stared at the cake, then at me, her lips parted but no sound emerging. James stepped forward, extending his hand, confusion evident in his expression. "You must be Claude," he said. "We were not expecting you until tomorrow." I did not take his offered hand. Instead, I addressed the room, my tone conversational despite the tension crackling in the air. "I drove 9 hours through the worst snowstorm I have ever seen to be here. Almost died twice. Paid a fortune to get my car fixed in the middle of nowhere. All to surprise my sister on her engagement." I turned back to Amanda. "I was outside the window. Heard everything." Amanda's face drained of color. "Claude, I can explain," she began, her voice thin and reedy. "No need," I replied calmly. "You were very clear. You hoped I would crash." A collective intake of breath from the onlookers. James shifted uncomfortably, looking from Amanda to me and back again, clearly trying to decide how to salvage the situation. "Look, man, I think there has been a misunderstanding," he started, putting a hand on my shoulder. I shrugged it off. "No misunderstanding. Just the truth." Finally, I turned back to Amanda. "For years I told myself that you understood why I left. That you knew I cared. That the money I sent for your college tuition, the calls I tried to make were enough." "Money does not replace presence," Amanda snapped, some of her composure returning now that the initial shock had passed. Her eyes flashed with the same defiance I remembered from her teenage years. "You left when I needed you most. I was 18, Amanda. I had my own life to build. And I was 14 and alone." Her voice rose, drawing more stares. "Mom was working double shifts. Dad had his new family. And you, my only ally, vanished to Seattle and your fancy tech job." "I did not vanish. I called. I visited when I could. Twice a year if I was lucky. Christmas and maybe my birthday if you could fit it into your schedule. Bitterness dripped from every word. James attempted to intervene again. "Maybe we should take this somewhere private," he suggested, gesturing toward a side room. I ignored him. "I was trying to make something of myself," I said to Amanda. "To build a foundation so I could help you, help Mom." "We did not need your money," she hissed. "We needed you. I needed my brother. Do you have any idea what high school was like for me? The rumors about why Dad left. The times I came home to an empty house because Mom had to work late. The graduation you missed because of some project deadline. Each accusation hit like a blow, yet beneath her anger I heard genuine pain. Still, her selective memory infuriated me. "I sent you money for college," I said, my own anger finally seeping into my voice. $30,000 over 4 years. Money I could barely afford while paying off my own student loans. Amanda blinked, momentarily thrown. "What are you talking about?" "The checks I sent to Mom every month for your tuition. She said you were too proud to accept help directly from me, so I sent it through her." Confusion replaced anger in her expression. "Mom paid for my college. She took out a second mortgage on the house." It was my turn to be stunned. The implications of what she was saying slowly sank in. The money I had sent, believing it was helping Amanda, had never reached her. "Which meant—" "Your mother is a piece of work," James muttered, seemingly forgetting his role as peacemaker. I held up a hand. "This is between Amanda and me." Amanda's eyes had filled with tears, mascara beginning to run down her cheeks in thin black rivulets. "Why are you doing this?" "Showing up unannounced, causing a scene at my engagement party." "Because I thought we could fix this," I answered honestly. "I thought if I made a grand gesture, showed you I still remembered the little things like your favorite cake, we could start over." I was wrong. James took a step toward me, his posture suddenly threatening. "I think you should leave." I stood my ground. I drove 9 hours through a snowstorm. I nearly died on a bridge in North Dakota. I spent every cent I had on emergency car repairs. All for someone who tells her friends she hopes I would crash before I got here. The brutal truth of my words seemed to echo in the silent room. Some guests looked away, embarrassed to be witnessing such a raw family conflict. Others watched with undisguised fascination. Amanda's face crumpled. "It was a joke," she whispered, though we both knew it was not. "I did not mean it." "Yes, you did," I replied gently. "And that is okay. It is better than the lies we have been telling each other for years." I turned to the crowd, suddenly aware of their discomfort. "I apologize for disrupting your evening. Please enjoy the cake. It really is excellent." As I moved to leave, Amanda caught my arm. "Claude, wait. Do not go like this." For a moment, I wavered. Despite everything, she was still my sister, still the little girl I had taught to ride a bike and helped with math homework. But the woman before me now was a stranger, someone who had nurtured resentment against me for a decade, someone who could joke about my death with her friends. "I think it is best if I do," I said finally. "Congratulations on your engagement." As I walked toward the exit, James called after me. "You cannot just drop a bomb like that and leave." I paused at the door, looking back at the tableau I was leaving behind. Amanda crying, James fuming, guests shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. "I am not dropping anything," I said. "I am just finally acknowledging what has been true for years. We are not the family we pretend to be." With that, I stepped back into the snowy night, the door closing with a soft click behind me. The confrontation had not gone, as I had imagined during those long hours on the road. There had been no tearful reconciliation, no healing embrace. Instead, there had been only truth, harsh and painful, but truth nonetheless. As I trudged back to my car, snow soaking through my shoes, I felt oddly lighter. The weight of expectations, of obligation, of guilt that I had carried for years had been lifted. In its place was a hollow ache, the grief of losing someone who, in reality, had been lost to me long ago. I had no destination in mind as I walked away from the lakeside, allowing my feet to carry me through the familiar yet foreign streets of my hometown. The snow continued to fall in gentle flurries, dusting my hair and shoulders, melting against my flushed skin. The cold was biting, but I welcomed it, the physical discomfort providing a counterpoint to the emotional turmoil within. After walking for nearly an hour, my body began to protest. I had been driving for days, had barely slept, and the confrontation had drained what little energy I had left. A neon sign caught my attention, Lou's Diner, a 24-hour establishment I remembered from my high school days. I pushed through the door, the bell jingling cheerfully in stark contrast to my mood. The diner was nearly empty at that hour, just a couple of truckers at the counter and an elderly couple in a booth near the back. I slid into a booth by the window, staring out at the snow-covered street without really seeing it. A middle-aged waitress approached, coffee pot in hand. "You look like you could use this," she said, filling a mug without waiting for my response. Her name tag read Patty. "Thanks," I murmured, wrapping my cold hands around the warm ceramic. She studied me for a moment, her experienced eyes taking in my exhausted state. "Bad night." I laughed humorlessly. "You could say that." "Food helps," she said simply, sliding a menu toward me. "So does talking, if you are interested. Not much else to do on a slow night like this." I ordered a full breakfast despite the late hour, suddenly aware of how little I had eaten that day. As Patty moved away to place my order, I pulled out my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Amanda already, and several text messages ranging from angry to pleading. I turned the phone off and put it away. Whatever needed to be said between us would have to wait until I could process what had happened. The elderly couple from the back booth stopped by my table on their way out. The man, stooped but dignified in an old-fashioned wool coat, paused beside me. "Forgive an old man for intruding," he said, his voice gentle. "But I could not help overhearing some of your conversation with the waitress. You sound troubled, son." Under normal circumstances, I might have politely but firmly rebuffed such an approach. But there was something in his kind eyes that broke through my defenses. "Family trouble," I admitted. "My sister and I had a falling out tonight." The woman, her silver hair neatly styled beneath a winter hat, nodded sympathetically. "Family can hurt us deeper than anyone else because they know where all the soft spots are." "Helen knows what she is talking about," the man said with a sad smile. "We have not spoken to our son in 15 years. This unexpected confession startled me. "May I ask why?" Helen sighed. "Pride on both sides." Harsh words that could not be taken back. The longer the silence stretched, the harder it became to break it. "Do you regret it?" I asked. The man, who introduced himself as George, considered this. "We regret the loss of relationship. The years we could have shared but did not. But sometimes separation is necessary until healing can occur. Not all rifts can or should be mended immediately." Their words resonated with me, offering a perspective I had not considered. Perhaps the break with Amanda, painful as it was necessary for both of us. They left me with their phone number scribbled on a napkin, an invitation to call if I needed to talk further. The simple act of kindness from strangers brought tears to my eyes for the first time that night. I made my way to a nearby hotel after finishing my meal, checking in with the last of my emergency credit card balance. The room was small but clean, offering a sanctuary from the emotional and physical storm I had been battling. Under the hot spray of the shower, I finally allowed myself to break down, sobs wrenching from my chest as I processed the events of the evening. Later, lying in bed with sleep eluding me despite my exhaustion, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Amanda as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, proudly holding up a drawing. Amanda at her high school graduation, Mom and I flanking her. I had made it to the ceremony despite her claims to the contrary, though I had to leave immediately after for a red-eye flight back to Seattle. The last photo we had taken together, 3 Christmases ago, both of us smiling but a visible distance between us. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "We need to talk." "Please." I turned the phone off again, not ready for that conversation. The revelation about the money I had sent for her education troubled me deeply. Had Mom simply kept it for herself, used it for other expenses, or was there some other explanation I was missing? I resolved to meet with Mom the next day before leaving town. I had planned to drive straight back to Seattle in the morning, but now I knew I needed to extend my stay by at least one day. Some truths needed to be uncovered before I could begin to process everything that had happened. Morning brought no relief from my emotional turmoil, but at least the physical world had calmed. The storm had passed overnight, leaving Minneapolis transformed into a winter wonderland of pristine white. I texted Mom, asking to meet for coffee, keeping my message brief and uninformative. Her reply came quickly, suggesting a cafe near her workplace at noon. The coffee shop was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived. Mom was already there, looking older than I remembered, her once vibrant red hair now threaded with gray. Her smile faltered as she took in my appearance, concern replacing her initial warmth. "Claude, what happened? You look terrible." I sat across from her, not returning her attempt at an embrace. "I went to Amanda's engagement party last night." Her eyes widened. "But that is tonight." "No, it was last night. The actual party was last night. Tonight is just for family." The realization dawned that I had been deliberately misled about the date, another layer to Amanda's deception. I told Mom about what had happened, watching her face carefully as I mentioned the money I had sent for Amanda's education. A flicker of guilt crossed her features before she looked away. "Mom, what happened to that money?" She sighed deeply. "It is complicated, Claude. Uncomplicated for me. Your father stopped paying child support when Amanda turned 18. I was struggling with the mortgage, with bills. When your checks came, I convinced myself it was only fair that I use that money, that I had sacrificed for both of you for years. The betrayal cut deep. You let me believe I was helping Amanda. You let her believe I never helped at all. She was so angry with you for leaving," Mom said defensively. "I thought it would only hurt her more to know you were sending money, like you were trying to buy her forgiveness." "That was not your decision to make." My voice rose, drawing stares from nearby tables. I forced myself to speak more quietly. "Do you have any idea what that did to our relationship? She resents me for abandoning her, and I resented her for never acknowledging my help." Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I was trying to protect both of you." "No," I said firmly. "You were protecting yourself. And you damaged us both in the process." The conversation continued, painful truths emerging like splinters being drawn from old wounds. Mom revealed that Amanda had been in therapy for abandonment issues, stemming from both Dad's departure and what she perceived as my desertion. She spoke of Amanda's struggles through college, her determination to become completely self-sufficient so she would never have to depend on family again. "She's built walls," Mom said sadly, "around her heart, around her life. Even James has trouble getting through sometimes. But she loves you, Claude. Despite everything, she loves you." I wanted to believe that, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Love did not wish for someone's death, even in jest. Love did not distort shared history to paint oneself as victim and the other as villain. Perhaps there was affection buried beneath layers of resentment, but it bore little resemblance to the love we had once shared. As our conversation wound down, Mom tried once more to persuade me to attend the family dinner that evening. I declined, explaining that I needed time and distance to process everything. She did not push, perhaps recognizing the steel in my voice that indicated my mind was made up. We parted with an awkward hug, the physical contact highlighting the emotional distance between us. I promised to call once I was back in Seattle, a promise I intended to keep despite everything. She was still my mother, flawed and human though she might be. That night in my hotel room, I began writing a letter to Amanda. Not an email or a text, but an actual letter written on hotel stationery. I poured out my feelings, my regrets, my anger at her duplicity, but also my understanding of her pain. I wrote about our childhood, the good and the bad. I wrote about my reasons for leaving, my struggles in Seattle, my efforts to stay connected despite the distance. I wrote about Mom's deception regarding the money and how it had affected us both. Most importantly, I wrote about my hopes for our future relationship. Not the idealized closeness I had driven through a blizzard to reclaim, but something new, something built on honesty and respect rather than obligation and guilt. I did not know if such a relationship was possible, but I knew that continuing as we had been was not an option for either of our sakes. I sealed the letter in an envelope, writing her name on the front. I would mail it before leaving town tomorrow. It might not change anything between us, but at least I would have expressed my truth. The rest would be up to her. As I prepared for bed, I felt the first stirrings of peace. The confrontation had been painful, the truths uncovered devastating. But beneath the hurt was a sense of liberation, of burdens lifting. For the first time in years, I had acted with complete authenticity in relation to my family. Whatever came next would at least be based in reality rather than illusion. The return journey to Seattle could not have been more different from my eastward trek. Though the roads remained treacherous in places, the skies were clear, a brilliant blue canopy stretching above me as I crossed state lines. More significantly, my inner landscape had transformed. The desperate need to reconcile with Amanda, to reclaim our past closeness, had been replaced by a more nuanced understanding of our relationship and its limitations. I drove more carefully this time, stopping when fatigue set in rather than pushing through. At a roadside motel in Montana, I met a family also traveling west, their 2 young children filling the small diner with laughter at breakfast. The mother, noticing my solitary state, invited me to join them. That simple meal, shared with strangers who expected nothing from me, soothed something raw within my soul. Before leaving Minneapolis, I had mailed the letter to Amanda and sent a text letting her know it was coming. Her reply had been brief. I will read it. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but not rejection either. It was a start. When I finally arrived back in Seattle, my apartment welcomed me with its familiar comfort. My roommate Tyler had stocked the refrigerator with my favorite beer and left a note. Welcome home, survivor. Pizza and war stories when you are ready. His casual acceptance of whatever had transpired in Minneapolis was exactly what I needed. That night over pizza and beer, I told him everything. He listened without interruption, his expression shifting from shock to anger to sympathy as I recounted the events of the past week. So what happens now? He asked when I had finished. I do not know, I admitted. But I know what does not happen. I do not go back to pretending everything is fine. I do not keep trying to buy forgiveness through money or grand gestures. Sounds like a good start, he said simply. The next 2 weeks were a period of processing and reflection. I returned to work, grateful for the routine and mental engagement it provided. My boss, seeing my subdued state, did not press for details about my family emergency, merely asking if I needed additional time off. I declined, knowing that occupation was better for me than rumination. Friends reached out, sensing something had changed. I found myself more open with them than I had been previously, sharing parts of my family history I had always kept guarded. Their support, offered without judgment, helped me see that I was not defined solely by my role as Amanda's brother or by my perceived failures in that role. 17 days after I returned to Seattle, a thick envelope arrived from Minneapolis. Amanda's handwriting on the front sent a jolt through me. Inside was a multi-page letter, her response to mine. Her words were raw, honest in a way our interactions had not been for years. She acknowledged the hurt she had caused with her comments at the engagement party, though she did not fully apologize for them, explaining they came from a place of deep pain. She wrote about her teenage years after I left, the abandonment she felt from both Dad and me, the crushing responsibility of being Mom's emotional support. Most revealing was her admission that she had built her identity around being the one who was left behind, the one who persevered despite being abandoned. My reappearance, especially as a surprise, had threatened that narrative. My revelation about the money had forced her to reconsider not just her view of me, but of Mom as well, shaking foundations she had thought solid. There was no neat resolution offered in her letter, no promise that everything would be fixed between us. Instead, there was something potentially more valuable, a willingness to see me as I actually was, rather than the villain she had constructed in her mind. It was a beginning, albeit a fragile one. I kept my promise to call George and Helen, the elderly couple from the diner. Our conversation was brief but meaningful, an exchange of updates on our respective family situations. They invited me to write to them, an old-fashioned gesture that touched me deeply. I found myself sending them a letter the following week, the act of putting pen to paper somehow more intimate and thoughtful than an email or text. Through them, I was introduced to a community center in Seattle, where they had volunteered before moving to Minneapolis for their retirement. The center ran programs for teenagers from challenging home situations, providing mentorship and support. On an impulse, I signed up as a volunteer, committing to 2 evenings a week. My first session was terrifying. I had little experience with teenagers and no formal training in counseling or education. But as I sat awkwardly with a group of boys playing basketball, one of them, a lanky 14-year-old named Marcus, asked me directly why I was there. "My family is a mess," I said honestly. I thought maybe I could help someone else deal with that better than I did. My candor seemed to break through some invisible barrier. By the end of the evening, several of the teens were talking to me, sharing fragments of their own family struggles. I made no pretense of having answers, but I could offer what George had given me: a listening ear and the perspective that sometimes distance is necessary for healing. Over the subsequent months, my work at the center became increasingly important to me. I saw in these teens echoes of Amanda and myself, grappling with family fractures beyond their control. By helping them navigate their situations, I was also processing my own past from a new angle. The holiday season approached, traditionally a time when I would have flown to Minneapolis to maintain the illusion of familial harmony. This year, I declined Mom's invitation, explaining that I needed to establish new traditions. Instead, I joined Tyler and a group of friends for Thanksgiving, each of us contributing a dish and sharing stories of holidays past, both good and bad. For Christmas, I volunteered to work at the center's holiday event, helping create a celebration for teens who, for various reasons, could not be with their families. The genuine joy and community I experienced that day contrasted sharply with the tense, performative nature of previous family Christmases. 6 months after the engagement party incident, I received a text from Amanda that was different from our recent, cautious exchanges. "I will be in Seattle next month for a work conference. Coffee?" My response was immediate. "I would like that." The prospect of seeing Amanda face to face again brought a swirl of emotions. Apprehension, hope, residual anger, curiosity. But beneath it all was a fundamental change in my approach. I was no longer desperate for her approval or forgiveness. I wanted reconnection, yes, but on terms that honored who we both had become, not just who we had been to each other in childhood. The months of distance had provided perspective. I had begun to see that my drive to repair our relationship had not been entirely altruistic. It had been fueled by guilt, by a need to see myself as the good brother who had not abandoned his family. Releasing that self-image, acknowledging my mistakes while also recognizing the validity of my own choices, had been painful but ultimately liberating. In our exchange of letters, Amanda had begun a similar process of reevaluation. Her latest communication indicated she had confronted Mom about the money, leading to difficult but necessary conversations about the dynamics that had shaped their relationship after I left. She was seeing a new therapist, one who specialized in family systems, and was beginning to untangle the ways in which our parents' divorce had influenced her attachment patterns. As I replied to her text, confirming a time and place for our meeting, I realized that regardless of what happened when we saw each other again, I was no longer defined by my role as her brother alone. Through my work at the center, through my deepening friendships, through my correspondence with George and Helen, I had begun to build a life rich with connections that had nothing to do with DNA or shared history. The painful rupture at Amanda's engagement party had not been an ending after all, but a beginning, a catalyst for growth and transformation neither of us could have anticipated. Whatever came next, I knew I would face it not from a place of desperation or guilt, but from one of tentative hope and newfound strength. The coffee shop Amanda suggested for our meeting was in downtown Seattle, a neutral territory for both of us. I arrived early, securing a quiet table by the window where we could talk without being overheard. When she walked through the door, I almost did not recognize her. Gone was the glamorous woman from the engagement party, replaced by someone more casual, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail reminiscent of her teenage years. She spotted me immediately, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she straightened her shoulders and approached. The moment hung between us, laden with the weight of our shared history and recent conflict. Then, in a gesture that surprised us both, she leaned in for a brief hug. "You look good," she said as she sat down, studying me with curious eyes. "So do you," I replied and meant it. Despite the tension evident in her posture, there was a groundedness to her that had been missing at the party. Our initial conversation was awkward, filled with careful small talk about her flight, the Seattle weather, her conference schedule. We were like strangers with too much history, unsure how to navigate this new territory. "I read your letter," she said finally after our coffee arrived. "Several times, actually." "I read yours too." She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I never asked you why you left for Seattle. I always assumed it was because you wanted to get away from us, from the mess after Dad left." "Part of it was opportunity," I admitted. "The tech industry was booming here. But part of it was exactly what you thought. I needed distance from everything that had happened." "I took it personally," she said quietly. "Like you were leaving me specifically, not the situation." "I know that now. I should have seen it then. We were both kids, really. Even though you were 18, that is still so young to be dealing with everything that happened." This simple acknowledgement, that we had both been young people struggling with circumstances beyond our control, felt monumental. For years, I had carried the guilt of leaving as if I had been a fully formed adult making a conscious choice to abandon my family, rather than a teenager trying to find my way forward. Our conversation deepened as the hours passed, moving from careful politeness to raw honesty. We discussed Mom's deception about the money, Amanda's shock upon learning the truth, and the difficult conversations that had followed. "She thought she was protecting both of us," Amanda said. "In her twisted way, she believed she was doing the right thing. That does not make it okay." "No, it does not. But understanding her motivation helps me separate her actions from who she is, as a whole person. I am working on that in therapy a lot, actually, seeing people as complex rather than all good or all bad." There was wisdom in her words that reflected significant inner work. The Amanda who had wished for my car accident would not have been capable of such nuance. "How is therapy going?" I asked. "Hard," she admitted with a small smile. "Really hard. Turns out I have some serious abandonment issues to work through." "Who would have guessed?" Her self-deprecating joke broke some of the tension between us. For the first time since I had arrived at her engagement party, we laughed together, a genuine moment of connection. As our conversation continued, it became clear that while significant healing had begun, our relationship would never return to the idealized closeness of our childhood. Too much had happened. Too many years of distance and misunderstanding had created a chasm that could be bridged, but never fully closed. "I am not coming to the wedding," I said when the topic inevitably arose. She nodded, unsurprised. "I thought you might say that. Are you still angry about what you overheard?" "Not angry anymore, no. But I think we both need more time. And honestly, I think your day should be about you and James, not about our family drama." "James feels terrible about that night, by the way," she said. He had only ever heard one side of the story. "I do not blame him," I assured her. "He was protecting you." The realization that I could now see James's behavior that night with compassion rather than resentment, was another sign of how much I had changed over the past year. The perspective I had gained through working with the teens at the center had helped me understand that loyalty, even misplaced loyalty, came from a place of love. We parted that afternoon with another hug, this one longer and more genuine than the first. There was no dramatic declaration of forgiveness, no promise that everything was fixed. Instead, there was a mutual acknowledgement that we were both works in progress, learning to relate to each other as the adults we had become rather than the siblings we had been. In the months that followed, Amanda and I established a new pattern of communication, texting occasionally and speaking on the phone once a month. Our conversations were sometimes still awkward, sometimes surprisingly easy, but always honest. We were building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed at her engagement party, something perhaps less intense but ultimately healthier than before. As promised, I did not attend her wedding, but I sent a carefully chosen gift. A handcrafted wooden box containing letters I had written chronicling our shared childhood memories from my perspective. It was my way of honoring our history while acknowledging that we were creating a different future. The holiday season approached again, bringing with it decisions about how to spend the time. Rather than agonizing over whether to visit Minneapolis, I created new traditions. I hosted a chosen family Thanksgiving at my apartment, inviting friends who, for various reasons, could not or chose not to spend the holiday with biological relatives. The celebration was chaotic, imperfect, and filled with more genuine joy than any family gathering I could remember. For Christmas, I volunteered again at the youth center, but also accepted an invitation to spend Christmas Eve with George and Helen, who had moved back to Seattle to be closer to medical facilities as George's health declined. Their small apartment, decorated with ornaments collected over 60 years of marriage, became a place of profound peace for me. They spoke openly about their estranged son, about their regrets, but also about the acceptance they had found. The hardest lesson, Helen told me as we sat by their small tree, is learning that love sometimes means letting go. Not everyone is meant to walk with us through our entire journey. Her words resonated deeply with what I had come to understand about my relationship with Amanda. Love remained between us, but it had evolved from the intense, almost symbiotic connection of our childhood into something more measured, more mindful. We would never again be as close as we once were, but perhaps we could build something more authentic in its place. The Snowstorm journey that had ended so disastrously had, in retrospect, been exactly what we both needed. It had shattered illusions, forced truths into the open, and created space for genuine growth. The pain had been necessary, the confrontation inevitable if we were ever to move beyond the patterns that had trapped us for a decade. As I reflect on that journey now, I see it as a metaphor for the larger path we all must travel. Sometimes we must drive through blizzards of pain and disillusionment to reach clearer weather. Sometimes relationships must break completely before they can be rebuilt in healthier ways. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to face difficult truths, even when they shatter our most cherished beliefs about family and belonging. The most profound lesson I have learned is that home is not necessarily where we were born or with whom we share DNA. Home is where we are seen and accepted for who we truly are, flaws and all. For some, that place is with family of origin. For others, it must be created through chosen connections, through communities built on mutual respect and understanding rather than obligation. I do not know what the future holds for Amanda and me. Perhaps we will continue to grow closer over time, or perhaps we will maintain the careful distance that currently defines our relationship. What I do know is that I am no longer defined solely by my role as her brother, just as she is not defined solely by being my sister. We are complex individuals with our own journeys, intersecting at points but not bound to travel the same road. What about you? Have you ever had to confront painful truths about a family relationship? How did you navigate that difficult terrain? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey through family conflict and healing resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more stories of transformation. Your support means the world to me, and I am grateful to each of you who take the time to connect. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be.